This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Samoch Ches. All the learning has been generously sponsored as an incredible schos for Shlema for Chedvalea Bas Saradina Mir Tashem. The learning of the entire Chabura Baruch Hashem, as we grow and as we learn day by day, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam should ultimately bring Chedvalea Bas Saradina home from the hospital and Mir Tashem on the road to complete recovery, as well as learning Shvias Chashidah V'Shalchaim and Devar Tamsi Bas Verach Shalom Levizavo Even Teli Shem Mechayev L'Mitis Vasim Malka, as well as schos for Shalom Shal Yosef and Vedish Mom and Tila Dam Zil Mechlester and Chama Basriva Sarvlum Vasmindel Chayim Moshe Yeshua and Malka B'Seich Shar Chayli Yisrael, and we're holding on the bottom of Samach Zayin Omid Beis. Yesterday we read the Mishnah a bit quickly at the end of this year. The reason being is that today we're going to delve into the Mishnah as the Gemara often does, piece by piece. So what exactly was going on in the Mishnah is we begin with the first part of the Mishnah is that a Uber. And the din of the Mishnah is perhaps a unique din that the Mishnah taught us paislin v'loy machilin, that the existence of this uber, number one, passels the mother from eating chuma. She now, even if she prior was eating chuma, she can no longer. And number two, v'loy machilin, it doesn't allow her to eat. So it does two things. Now the Gemara explains where do these two things come into play. Says the Gemara in the bottom of Samach Zayin Beis, bas koyin li Yisrael, if she was a bas koyin, which let's remind ourselves, because we have the same din again and again. A bas koyin is a woman that grew up eating truma because her household is kuna, and therefore she grew up eating kachim. Then she marries Yisrael and she's not allowed to eat truma anymore. What happens in the event of death or divorce from her husband? She goes back chazra lebeis avia. She goes back to her father's house, and then she could once again, yes, eat truma. But says the Gemara, in this scenario of bas koyin li Yisrael, death or divorce, and now she's going back, so usually she could, yes, eat truma. But if she has an ubar, if she is pregnant with a fetus inside of her, he pasala, the fetus disallows her from going home and eating truma, because the fetus, as we've learned, has a portion in the estate of the husband, which was a Yisrael, and thereby entitles her and ties her still to her ex-husband, the Yisrael, and therefore she cannot eat truma of her father's house. Kinu rea, pralameu baris. The pasuk says that that when she gets divorced or death, she goes back to her father's house like in her youth. Kinurel, that comes to exclude if one is a mu'uberesh, she's not like minurel, therefore she cannot eat truma. That's case number one. Case number two is ibas Yisrael l'kain. If she was a bas Yisrael, so she grew up not eating truma, she got married and now she can yes eat truma. Now what's the halacha? He lo imachala. The ober does not allow ibas Yisrael l'kain. He lo imachala. After the husband dies, the uber does not allow her to continue eating truma like she was married. Why? Yulod Meichel she'eno yulod einoi Meichel. If a baby is born, she has a child, that child can eat, that child has a portion in the state of the husband, of his father, which is a kayin, and then she, the mother, by extension of this little baby, gets to as well eat truma. But if, says the Gemara, the baby is not born yet, it's only an ober, it's a fetus, she cannot eat truma. So in both angles, whether it's bas koyin to Yisrael, she cannot continue eating truma, and whether it's she cannot, return to eating truma, and if it's a bas Yisrael to kayin, she cannot continue eating truma. Now this is going to be the same din that's going to play over a few times. Says the Gemara, what was case number two in the Mishnah was a yavam, someone is waiting yibun, again, paislin v'loy machilin. The Gemara explains, ibas koyin li Yisrael, he pasala. If she's a bas koyin married to Yisrael, the yavam that she's awaiting to do yibum to disallows her from continuing to eat truma. Incorrect. This allows her from eating truma back in her father's household. Why? Vishaval beisavia. The pasuk says she returns home. Pralishameres yavam. She's not returning home. She's awaiting yibam. So she does not go back to her father's house to kayin and eat truma. And ibas Yisrael kayin. So she's presently eating truma. He loy maichala. The new yavam does not allow her to continue eating truma and get fed. Why? Kinyin kasva emrachmana v'ho kinyin. It's only Kinyan Kasvai And this woman is not a kinyan to him, rather a kinyan to his brother, and therefore she cannot continue, she cannot eat truma based on the yavam. Case number 3 in the Mishnah was Erusin. If someone only does Erusin, then a Paislin, she's not allowed to eat truma. V'loi ma'achilin, it does not allow her to eat truma. Again, the same din. Ibas koyin li Yisrael, and now she does Erusin, yahi pasala. It disallows her from continuing to eat truma of her family's household. Da kanya v'havaya, as we turn over to Zamach Aleph, says the Gemara. Why? Because Erusin is a kinyan. She has a kinyan through the act of Erusin. Ula teaches us, as Rashi points out, the Gemara in Ksubas Daf Zayin, that midrabanan we don't allow her to eat truma until she's fully married with Nisuin, so the Erusin is not going to be enough. And now we go to case 4 in the Mishnah, which was a chayrish, a deaf mute, and again the Mishnah said, Poislin, v'loi machilin, explains the Gemara again, Ibas koyin li Yisrael. So the question is returning home to eat truma. He basala. The fact that she is a chayrish, the fact Ibas koyin li Yisrael basala, then she. One more time. She was a Bas Koyin married to a Yisrael who was a deaf mute. Pasala, that disallows her from eating truma back in her father's household. Why? Because there's a kinyan derabanan marriage with this chayrish, and that kinyan to the Yisrael disallows her from eating truma of her family's household. The chayrish does not allow her to eat. Why? As we just said, and the chayrish doesn't have a full kinyan, therefore she cannot start eating truma. And the next case of the Mishnah was Batisha Shanim, if the husband is 9 years old and one day he poislim lamachil. Explains the Gemara, we think that the case of Bent Isha is going back on the case of Shemeres Yavam. That she's awaiting Yibam to a man who's only 9 years old, a boy. So says the Gemara, that's what we think, that in this case it's Paislin, she cannot eat Shuma, V'loi machilin, it doesn't feed her. But I asked the Gemara, Lamai, what case are we referring to? Ilam mifsal kot, ilam mifsal. If we're referring to that she cannot continue eating Shuma, kotanami mifsal basala, then even a katan who is less than 9 years old would disallow her from eating truma. So then why would the Mishnah say a case of 9 years old in one day? And if we're trying to figure out at what age she's allowed to eat truma, we just said a moment ago that a yavam never has the ability to let her eat. So I asked the Gemara if the case of 9 years old in one day is going back on the case of Shemeres Yavam and Manashach, it could have either been a Katan or a Gadol, but I'd have to say a case of 9 years old and one day. So says the Gemara, Amar Abayah, 10 lines down, Yavam ben Tishajan v'yemechad, Habal Yevim dayaskinan. We're talking about a case that yes, the boy is 9, but he did an act of Yivam, he slept with her. On a daraisa level, an 9-year-old can make a kinyan. So I would have thought, because he affects a biblical acquisition, a kinyan midaraisa, sal kadei t'chamin old midaraisa kani lo biyasabiyah. Because it's a kinyan daraisa, because the act of tashmish has a din of biyah, so I would have thought midaraisa biyah ima that she could eat truma now. Kamash Malan asu bias ben tishan yamechad kamaimer begadol. Midrabanan, we consider such an act to be like maimer, like a kinyan derabanan, and therefore she cannot eat truma. So Amar le Rava, says Rava Tabai, 1 second. Yachi sevidik tani savi ben tishan yamechad savi sheinai. The Mishnah continue with the case of Safik. Hash tavadai ben tishan lo yamechad savik mi bai. What's the case of the Seifa? If in the first case, where she's for sure 9 years old, you still don't eat, you can't feed truma. What's the Mishnah continuing? By Kichi, also case of a Safik. Elamar Rava says, Rava's attempt number 3, what is the case of a 9-year-old in the Mishnah? The case is a 9-year-old, one that is puzzled, comes from a family that is possible. Says that the Gemara, de pasli bibi yasan, where the din of such a child is katani, the pasli bibi yasan, the being together, having intimate relations with one who is pasul, makes you pasul. Uchedetanya, as we learned in a brisa, bedishan v'yoymechad ger amoyni mayavi mitzri adaymi kusi nezin chalil mamzer. All these people who are usher to come to Klal Yisrael, these are all paislin. Shebo al kohenes levi Yisraelis, that was together with either Kohen Levi Yisrael. Paslua makes them pasul. So just like we see in this brayso that once the kid is 9 years old, it has the ability to pasul, so too that's going to be where our Mishnah gets that it's going to disallow them from eating truma. The end of the Mishnah is teaching us a bigger chiddush, that even if it's a suffix, it still disallows it. Ask the Gemara of Amikdani, say, the Mishnah concluded that if you cannot come into Klal Yisrael, then you're pasul. What's the obvious implication? Mechlal, we can be medayik, the reisha lav, askinon, that the first case the Mishnah is not dealing with pasul. From the fact that the Mishnah at the end said, anyone that pasuls from Truma, would seem to indicate that the first part of the Mishnah is not talking about that. Says the Gemara, no. Reish psulei kal, seif psulei kuna. Two different types of apostles, that's what the Mishnah is talking about. Now, says the Gemara, Gufa, going back in the brayso we just quoted. We brought in this brayso to understand the din of the Mishnah, but now says the Gemara, let's delve a bit deeper into this brayso, about 20 lines to the bottom, the two dots. First one line is seifa. Says the Gemara, Gufa. All these cases of people who are apostles, it makes them apostle. This man is apostle, it makes them apostle. Anytime that if a child is born, that child will be apostle, then paisel. Then it makes the woman paisel as well. If the child born is one in which a kohen is allowed to marry her, then you'd be allowed to even marry the mother. So that is this brayso that we're talking about. Now we're getting involved in the next discussion of the day, is the relationship between one who is forbidden, one who is asur, one who is pasul. What is the status of one who is together with them? So that was a long and lengthy brayso. Now asks the Gemara, where did you get this din? That the mere act of being intimate with one who is pasul makes you pasul, and therefore you cannot eat truma and you cannot marry a kohen. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, 10 lines to the bottom. Amar Kro, it says in the Torah, Bas Kohen Kisiel Ishzar, when the daughter of a Kohen is to a outside, literally a non-Kohen person, Kimsheniva la lepasala, pasla. Says the Gemara, you know we learn from here that if you're together with one who is pasul, you are pasul. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? Aimi Bayile, this pasuk that you just quoted, we need for something else. The Gemara Achmana Bas Kohen, the mitzvah Lazar. You know what this pasuk teaches me? A very basic halacha, that if a Bas Kohen marries a regular Yisrael, they don't need truma. So you're coming along and telling me this pasuk teaches me that it makes her pasul. No, we need the pasuk for the simple din that a Bas Kohen that marries a Yisrael doesn't need truma. Answers the Gemara, no. The fact that you only eat truma while you're married to the kohen, now we already know from this pasuk. The Torah says you go back to your father's household. What did that teach us until now? That teaches us that originally you cannot eat. And says the Gemara, that's the reason why we need that pasuk for. We need that pasuk. Excuse me, incorrect. We learn out from V'shaval Beisavia that din, and therefore the pasuk of Ubas Kayin is free to teach us our din that when you marry someone that is pasul, the woman becomes pasul as well. Asks the Gemara 3 lines at the bottom. If you're learning it out from the pasuk of Vishaval Beisavia, written in the positive, anytime you learn out a negative din from a positive pasuk, what is it in I say? It's a positive commandment. But is there krisis? Is there malchus? No. So the Torah had to write this din again to teach us that there is a lav, there is a krisis, there is a malchus in the case that you are together with the one who is pasul. So says the Gemara. So we don't need. The pasuk is One more time. The pasuk is necessary to teach me the lav that if a kohen's daughter is married to non-kohen, it's an Isser lav to eat truma. So now we're back to square one. We're trying to find a pasuk that when one is together with one who is pasul, they themselves become pasul. And we thought we could learn that from Bas Kohen Kisi Elish Zar. Says Gemara, no. We still need a pasuk to teach me that when a Bas Kohen is with an Ish Zar, that the halacha is you do not eat truma, and the pasuk teaches me that there's a lav. Because from Veshaval Beisavia, all we learned out it was an assay. So we still need a source. Says the Gemara, lav mivcholzar leyechal kodesh nafka. No, we've learned out the lav from the other pasuk, and therefore this pasuk is still extra to teach us the din that we need. Says the Gemara, as we turn over to Samach Chesem Beis, what do you mean? We need that pasuk to teach us its own din. That teach us the din about the pasuk itself. That in non-kohen can't eat truma. Very simple din. Says the Gemara, Trei v'cholzar ksivi. There's two psukim of the cholzar, and therefore it can teach us both dinim. Says the Gemara, 1 second. We still need a pasuk for Rav Yizra Chanina. Dam Rav Yizra Chanina v'cholzar, and any zar and any non-kohen. Zaros amarti l'chavlo aninos. A different drasha. So the pasuk isn't necessary to teach us the other din that we need. Answers the Gemara, the Rav Yosi Rav Chanina. The din of Rav Yizra Chanina min zar v'cholzar nafka. Ask the Gemara, "Vakati b'Bayil Chatanya, she chayzeres lichuma, avina chayzeres l'chazav ishayk." That when you go back home to your father's house, you don't go back 100%. You never get the chazav ishayk of the karbanis. V'amar Rav Chezdam Ravina bar Rav Shila Maikra. Where do we learn this out from a pasuk? Dichsev ubas koyin kisiyel ishzar he b'chumas kachim loy say achel. And from there we learn out, you can't eat that which is separated from the karbanos, from the chaza and the shaykh. So says the Gemara, we need this pasuk for a different din. So how do we know that when someone is together with, when the Bas Kohen is together with someone who is pasul, that she becomes pasul and she cannot eat truma? We do not have a pasuk. Says the Gemara, Im kein lechtev kroi, he bekachim loisei achel. My b'trumas ha'kachim shmas minatarti. We've learned out two dinim from this pasuk. So says the Gemara, we dealt with the first part of our brisa we said on the bottom of Amud Aleph, when brisa said that when the Bas Kohen is together with someone who is pasul, she becomes pasul and she cannot eat truma. Says the Gemara, Ashchan koyanes Levi Yisraelis minalan. What are you going to do with the Levi and the Yisraelis? You just told us the din about one who is a kohen. What about one who is a Levi? What about one who is the Yisrael? That is together with one who is pasul that we said on the bottom of Amud Aleph, that you're pasul from truma. Where do we know that from? Explains the Gemara, Rav Abbas, Ubas. We have a drasha from the word that it said Ubas, Bas Koyin, and it said, could have said Bas Koyin, and it said Ubas Koyin. Hachanami Bas Ubas. Says the Gemara, 1 second, come on, that only works like Rabbi Akiva the Darshav, Vimi Darsh is actually a vav of Ubas. So what about those who argue in Rabbi Akiva? Explains the Gemara, Afilu Demarabon. It's not just extra vav before the bas. That whole pasuk is unnecessary. So says the Gemara, okay, so you explain to me a kohen, you explain to me a Levi, you explain to me a Yisraelis. Ashkechan truma. So you taught me a din that they cannot eat truma anymore when they're together with one who is pasul. Likuna minalan. Where do we know the din that they are aser pasul likuna? Explains the Gemara. The kuna minalan. Says the Gemara. I don't understand. A regular Levi in Israel, are they not part of the kahuna? I don't understand. What's your havamina? You're not a kayin. Are these daughters, this Levi, the Israel, these girls, are they ever able to eat truma? Of course not. It says Mara, whoa, slow down, really? Alamalai? Why not? Why can't we say there is a scenario when the Levi and Yisraelis, yes, eat truma? In what case? If she has a child, like we said in the beginning of today's year, the child gets in it part of the Yerusha. The child is allowed to eat, and thereby, by extension, she can eat as well. Explains the Gemara, Bishvil Bina. Kal v'chomer. We learn out kal v'chomer. Uma kohen is the b'kedusha d'nav shachla. Yet pasala. Yet if she's together with someone who's pasal, she is pasal. Leviav Yisraelis the lo yachlel b'shel b'na. They only are ever allowed to eat truma via their child. Lo yikol shekain. Certainly, if they're together with someone who is pasal, that they themselves become pasal. Says the Gemara 1 second. V'yana yisanis within the kal v'chomer itself. Kohen is the Kaddish Gufa. Kohen is more holy. So pasala. So I understand when such an element who is so holy and is together with someone who is pasal, it pasals the Kohen. But the like Kaddish Gufa like pasala. But maybe Yisrael and a Levia who's not Kaddish, they would not be pasal if they're together with someone who is Aser, puzzle. Says the Gemara, Ella likuna. Rather, what does it mean that you're puzzle from kuna? Kavachemer mi grusha. Ma grusha shamutar bitruma. And yet, asura likuna. A grusha is allowed to take truma, and yet when she's a bas kohen, and yet she's not allowed to marry a kohen. Zu, this case, a woman who's together with one who is pasul ger, ma'ani, a moavi, mitzri, etc. Shasura bit truma, they're already also from truma with bas Yisrael. Hey, no, din shabsuli kuna, certainly she should be pasul from kuna. So now from a kal v'chomer. Ask the Gemara, whoa, what are you learning out from a kal v'chomer? V'chi mazirim min adin. Are you able to learn out Kal v'chomer a lav gomer? We hold, as Rashi points out from Marcus Yuzayin with base. Ein mazirim min adin. Says Gemara, you're right. Gilui milsa b'amu. The Kal v'chomer is just showing us. So Gilui milsa is not a real source. And we're going to pick it up from here as the Gemara is going to continue asking questions on the psukim and the next year. B'siyata dishmayo.